Their government was failing by 1787, which hadn't taken long. A mere decade after declaring independence, and only 4 years after winning a bloody revolution fought to prove that point, Americans found the Articles of Confederation that bound the states together wholly inadequate. Designed during the war by representatives of 13 independent states who longed to stay that way as much as possible, it denied federal officials the ability to effectively regulate the new nation's trade, orchestrate a unified foreign policy, or even maintain basic civil order. State power ruled instead of federal control, and it proved incapable of coping with a steady barrage of economic blows, diplomatic insults, and widespread popular unrest. Our situation is becoming every day more and more critical, James Madison lamented in early 1787. Frustrated by representing Virginia in a federal Congress powerless to change the nation's course, he found thoughtful observers unanimously agree that the existing Confederacy is tottering to its foundation. Calls for disunion multiplied, with many individuals of weight increasingly leaning towards monarchy for salvation. Monarchy was what the 13 colonies had rebelled against in the first place only a decade before. A tyrannical monarchy that had threatened their liberties, but at least had been able to provide order, which seemed increasingly appealing as an alternative to their current woes. Madison worried as their problems grew, with seemingly little their government could do in response, that Americans were losing all confidence in our political system, which neither has nor deserves advocates. They could at least attempt something better, which is why delegates gathered in Philadelphia throughout the summer of 1787 in hope of repairing their fatally flawed Constitution. If they failed to find a better way, or even a replacement powerful enough to tackle the nation's problems, yet constrained enough to ensure liberty's survival, the United States would likely become little more than a footnote in history. Therein lay the real problem, and the reason the Articles had constrained federal power in the first place. Power was dangerous. Americans in this era widely agreed it poisoned any who wielded it with an insatiable desire for more, its steady accumulation engendering corruption and injustice. Freed from Britain's powerful grip, they tried doing without a strong federal government of their own, and in particular without a national executive empowered to keep the peace and enforce the nation's laws, but soon found they couldn't live without either. What form of government could therefore be trusted with the power it required, without simultaneously employing that power to undermine liberty? More specifically, in whose hands could such power possibly be trusted? The question defined their entire epoch. Show me that age and country where the rights and liberties of the people were placed on the sole chance of their rulers being good men, without a consequent loss of liberty. Virginia's famed orator Patrick Henry subsequently challenged when the Constitutional Convention delegates were done forging a new government. I say that the loss of that dearest privilege has ever followed, with absolute certainty, every such mad attempt. Their proposed salvation might ultimately prove their undoing, he charged. The new Constitution, forged in Philadelphia, winked towards monarchy, with a presidency and legislature empowered not so much to ensure popular freedom and prosperity as to guarantee their own. Henry was right, at least about one thing. It had never worked before. The new American Republic lived in a world of monarchies, and no republic in history had ever been attempted over such a wide expanse and vast citizenry. Neither had any managed to retain the liberties proclaimed at its birth, as the virtuous rulers chosen to safeguard their people's security instead came to value their pocketbooks and powers more. Rome had fallen in this way. So too Athens, and every other example from the classical age that the delegates to the 1787 convention studied, finding to their dismay that even the most virtuous republic proved vulnerable to this same unavoidable flaw. There is scarce a king in 100 who would not, if he could, follow the example of Pharaoh. Pennsylvania's scientist and statesman Benjamin Franklin reminded his fellow delegates. Get first all the people's money, then all their lands, and then make them and their children servants forever. This was simply the natural order of things. It will be said that we don't propose to establish kings in our new government, he continued, yet I am apprehensive, indeed, perhaps too apprehensive, that the government of the states may in future times end in a monarchy. Franklin's was no isolated fear, which extended well beyond a simplistic if ominous fear of one day living under a new American king. Leaders charged with protecting liberty, the founders believed, might one day prove its demise.